Hey, everybody. This is another one about conversations. And you've been hearing me go on and on about why it's really important to have conversations with a wide variety of people and to start to make connections human to human across the political spectrum and across other types of divisions within our communities. This is all a matter of election violence prevention, because again, we are building these resilient communities that are unlikely to respond to violence with violence because we have the human to human connections and we're interrupting the rumors and we're not letting things escalate. But there's a little bit of a question that people ask sometimes about, what do you mean by having conversations? What does a conversation even look like in this kind of context? So let's chat a little bit about three different types of conversations that you might have with somebody from a different part of the political spectrum. The first one of these is just a getting to know you conversation. This can happen anywhere, and it might be a structured conversation and it might be an unstructured conversation. This can be in the grocery store line. This can be at a gathering in the park. This can be when I'm stuck in traffic and I'm leaning out the window. That might be a weird place to do it. But you know what I mean? There are lots of different possibilities. It's just a matter of making a connection with a person that I didn't know before. And what do I do during such a conversation? I learn about their interests. I find out about their family and friends. I ask questions about their daily life. What do they do for a living? What kind of hobbies do they enjoy? And I get a sense of their political perspective. We might disagree. I might disagree with the political perspective or the moral perspective or other types of opinions that this person has. But in this kind of connection, the point of it is not to convince somebody. I'm not even trying to talk them out of their political stuff. I'm just trying to make the connection and say, hey, I'm a person, you're a person. Let's talk about our nieces and nephews or something along those lines. It's just, like I said, it's that human to human connection. The reason why this is so important is because, again, it's the subgroup connecting to subgroup. It's that personal relationship that leads to a more resilient community, and we are going to respond non-violently to a violent provocation. It's about calming down that environment and making it non-reactive. Then there's a second type of conversation that I might have in other settings, and I would call this the good political dialogue conversation. And if I'm having this conversation, we're talking explicitly about politics, and I might be trying to convince the person that I'm talking to that I'm right and they're wrong. It is totally possible that that's my intention. But I'm going to go about this in a different way than I see sometimes in the culture around me. I'm not going to shout. I'm not going to call names. I'm not going to dismiss the other person's point of view. Instead, the way I'm going to dialogue in this situation is, first of all, to start with really deep listening and paying attention and understanding where the other person is coming from and what their point of view actually is. Not what I assume it is, but what it actually is. And then I can share my own experience and also practice acknowledging complexity. This is what it's like for me. And also, I understand that this is a complicated situation, and here's what I see in your point, and here's what I see in my point. I know that I don't have to convince somebody in this conversation, in this moment, to change the way that they are thinking about things. Being open to this kind of mutual sharing kind of connection is all by itself a transformational experience. So whatever conversation they've had with me in the context of this political dialogue piece is planting a seed for a time when their heart might be changed in the future. I also have to acknowledge the fact that in this kind of conversation, my heart might be changed. I should be open to that. If I am listening very deeply to the person who's speaking to me, that means I am also open to the possibility of changing. Not necessarily changing my mind to agree with them, although that's a possibility, but at the very least, being open to the possibility of understanding something that I didn't understand before. In this kind of political dialogue conversation, I'm again looking for the human to human connection, and that's election violence prevention. And also, I'm opening up to that idea of transformation, the changing of hearts over a long period of time. And then there's this third possible type of conversation, which is an actual preventing election violence conversation, where that is the explicit topic that we're discussing together. We're talking about election violence, and we're talking about preventing that in our own community. One of the questions that I might ask in this context is whether this person is worried about this. And maybe they are, and maybe they're not. It's actually really common for people to be afraid that somebody else is going to start election violence, even though they themselves do not intend to. And then I can talk a little bit about the fact that most people don't want election violence, which is true. The vast majority of people have no intention of, encouraging violence within the context of their local communities. Sometimes we do things that encourage violence without realizing that's what we're doing, but most of us do not want it. And then there can be a kind of open wondering, like, what do you think might actually help prevent this? And here are some things that I have heard. If you've been paying attention to these videos, you know all kinds of things that can make a difference to make it less likely that election violence will happen in a particular area. And then if the person's really into it, you can offer them some of the good resources, point them toward that Braver Angels Trustworthy Elections report or the Gandhi King Academy. Or if the person is not looking for an academic experience and they don't want to learn all this stuff, which a lot of people don't, then it's just a matter of that human to human relationship and making that connection and saying, let's you and I keep talking about what we might be able to do in this community. When I'm having that preventing election violence conversation really explicitly, I have the human to human connection, which is preventing election violence all by itself. I have the potential transformational experience because we're encountering each other across difference and we're opening our hearts and being vulnerable in relationships. And then there's also the intentional election violence prevention piece of this conversation, where we might actually come up with a project we're working together or a strategy for making election violence less likely in our local community. 3 very different types of conversations, all of which are good ones. There's the getting to know you, there's the good political dialogue, and there's the preventing election violence. All 3 of these are great conversations to have as we're going about our daily lives and trying to create the kind of community that's less likely to experience violence in the election cycle.